Welcome to Sino-Warfare with Ralph D. Sawyer. Sun-tzu in 13 minutes has been created in response to numerous requests for a concise yet substantial introduction to the art of war, more appropriate to our high-velocity age. In accord with the general format of my other talks, it's just 13 minutes long. But any questions that remain can be resolved by watching the other topical versions. Before beginning, I'd like to note that we'll suspend the historically important, but largely academic question of whether Sun-tzu ever existed, or whether he played a role in Wu's ascension to power at the end of the 6th century BC as a strategist and military advisor, as well as whether he composed the art of war. But we'll still refer to the book's author as Sun-tzu for convenience. And in accord with the understanding, utilization, and belief of thousands of Chinese commanders and military thinkers over the past 2 millennia, I'll be treating the art of war strictly as a military text, rather than some sort of esoteric treatise on geomantic harmonization. And finally, I'd like to emphasize that contrary to the usual depictions and scholarly disinterest in warfare and its effects in China, the history of China is a history of unremitting conflict that repeatedly destroyed the infrastructure, decimated the populace, and inflicted untold millions of casualties. Whether composed just at the start of the 5th century BC or over the next century, the art of war reflects the rapid military developments witnessed in the spring and autumn's 2.5 centuries of conflict. It was an era in which armies grew from loosely coordinated forces of a few thousand warrior aristocrats to highly organized armies that campaigned for weeks instead of days, and saw the original 140 or so fief-like states reduced to a mere 12. Because it was a time of virulent enmity, shifting alliances, of multiple threats rather than singular opponents, the enormous losses in men and material suffered in gaining victory could be just as devastating as defeat, and the absence of forces a temptation to potential invaders. The text therefore begins by boldly asserting, warfare is the greatest affair of state, the basis of life and death, the Tao to survival or extinction. In a realm in which righteousness and ritual were purportedly the sole means to ensure peace and stability, turning the focus onto warfare was revolutionary. Combat's increasing complexity, the staggering cost of defeat, not just death and loss, but enslavement and extinction, prompted strategists to begin examining its patterns. By stating, quote, it must be thoroughly pondered and analyzed, Sun-tzu transformed it into a subject of conscious contemplation. Knowledge and experience became necessary to master military complexity. Rationality and calculation to decide whether to engage in warfare. Assessment and wisdom to formulate strategy and tactics. Sun-tzu further advised, if it isn't advantageous, don't move. If objectives can't be attained, don't employ the army. Unless endangered, don't engage in warfare. Accordingly, a single concept, the ruthless practice of efficient warfare, underlies, informs, pervades the entire book. However, his defining vision shouldn't be confused with the efficient practice of ruthless warfare. That's an approach commanders deliberately adopted to terrify their opponents into surrendering. Now, strength's importance can't be minimized, but, quote, one who knows the enemy and knows himself won't be endangered in 100 engagements. Sun-tzu also said, one who knows when he can fight and when he cannot fight will be victorious. And one who truly knows the enemy will never be deluded when he moves, never be impoverished when initiating an action. Now, in Sun-tzu's time, divination was employed to decide important state affairs, including warfare. However, he summarily rejected it, and reordered intelligence acquisition to the human realm. Observers, defectors, local informants are always useful, but recourse has to be to trained agents who can ferret out information, ascertain the actual situation. His infamous chapter, Employing Spies, the world's first contemplation of spycraft, identifies 5 categories: local spies, internal spies, double, expendable, they're responsible for spreading disinformation, and living, they're the equivalent of contemporary spies. Great skill is required to properly motivate and employ them, to, quote, learn the enemy's intentions in detail. The information acquired about the enemy's plans and critical factors such as strength must then be comparatively weighed to produce a net assessment, determine the feasibility of campaigns and battle. Although numerous categories for fathoming the enemy, analyzing battlefield developments appear in the text, 7 are deemed critical. Which ruler has the Tao? Whose generals have greater ability? Who has gained the advantages of heaven and earth? Whose laws and orders are more thoroughly implemented? Whose forces are stronger? Whose officers and troops are better trained? Whose rewards and punishments are clearer? Now, since commanders determine the army's fate, they're particularly subject to scrutiny in order to identify flaws that can be exploited, such as being easily angered. Conversely, because it's essential to prevent others from gaining this sort of knowledge, quote, when you mobilize the army and form strategic plans, you must be unfathomable. Secrecy extends to the army itself, which should strive to be formless, never betray its intentions, thereby compelling the enemy to fumble around in ignorance, unable to mount effective defensive or offensive measures. With adequate knowledge, the crucial step, manipulating the enemy, creating the circumstances required for victory, including assuming the strategic defensive if victory isn't possible, can be initiated. But even better is thwarting the enemy from the outset. Thus, he says, the highest realization of warfare is attacking the enemy's plans. Next is attacking their alliances. Next, attacking their army. And the lowest, attacking their fortified cities. Moreover, quote, attaining 100 victories in 100 battles is not the pinnacle of excellence. Subjugating the enemy's army without fighting is the true pinnacle of excellence. The art of war describes a number of measures intended to compel men rather than be compelled by them, including display profits to entice them, create disorder, anger and make them arrogant to induce errors, force them to move in order to tire and destabilize them, and thereby realize the localized tactical superiority known as chuan that makes victory possible. In accord with Sun-tzu's pronouncement, warfare is the Tao of deception. A key facilitator or lever in this process is deceit or being deceptive, such as by feigning being incapable, tired, immobile, or more actively, feinting to left or right, spreading disinformation, creating false appearances, striving to be formless. Several concepts underpin the process of strategic planning, structure the management of forces. Foremost among them is sure, which have long term the strategic configuration of power. The concept clearly entails the idea of positional advantage, and it's inherently comparative. But rather than just strength, it refers to the Army's overall capability. It encompasses factors as diverse as training, experience, organization and discipline, resilience, combat spirit, command competence, equipment, logistical support, and finally, physical condition. When every means have been employed to weaken and exhaust the enemy, to reduce their fighting capability and spirit. If the army is properly configured, it will enjoy such a great tactical advantage that the impact of its attack will be like the sudden onrush of water cascading down a mountain, or a boulder crushing an egg, to cite two of Sun-tzu's analogies. However, massive armies tend to become moribund and intractable, so flexibility is crucial. The army must maneuver and be deployed in accord with the enemy's intentions and disposition, and the tactical constraints imposed by the terrain's configuration, another key art of war concept. When it comes to formulating the operational tactics required to achieve victory, the text's most innovative concept is that of the unorthodox qi and orthodox zheng, as they're usually ordered. In essence, zheng is synonymous with conventional measures, with employing troops in normal, by-the-book, and therefore predictable ways, such as launching massive frontal assaults while stressing order and deliberate movement. In contrast, qi, or unorthodox tactics, are realized by employing forces, especially flexible ones, in imaginative, unconventional, unexpected ways. However, in any situation, the alternatives are multiple rather than singular, or simply A, B, either or, attack or retreat. Another crucial element in the Army's performance is combat spirit, generally called qi. Although Spring and Autumn commanders had already recognized its importance, the art of war makes it an explicit objective for manipulation and a target for psychological attack. Commanders have to nurture it in their men while also trying to deflate the enemy's spirit and undermine their resilience in extremely difficult or hopeless situations on so-called fatal terrain. They can exploit the natural tendency of desperate men to fight fervently when cornered. The art of war emphasizes the importance of quickly concluding any conflict, and therefore emphatically advises against undertaking sieges or assaulting fortified cities. If there's a single fundamental principle, it's go forth where they don't expect it, attack where they aren't prepared. Vacuity, in other words, gaps and weaknesses, should be struck first. Substantiality avoided. The army's maneuver facilitated by moving through unoccupied terrain while you compel the enemy onto difficult, easily targeted ground. Now, naturally, gaps in the enemy's disposition have to be discovered, which is why Sun-tzu advocated probing to detect them. Command and control also figure prominently. The essential problem is forging a clearly defined hierarchical organization that can effectively exercise control over disciplined, responsive troops. Dividing the soldiers into operational units provides the necessary structure. Gongs, drums, pennants, and flags, the means to command the men. And, quote, unify the men's ears and eyes, because then the courageous won't be able to advance alone. The fearful won't be able to retreat alone. Rewards and punishments were considered the foundation of military discipline, but unifying the men the key, because one whose upper and lower ranks have the same desire will be victorious. In sum, the art of war can be said to have a unifying vision that emphasizes the ruthless practice of efficient warfare. It's one founded upon thorough knowledge and based upon manipulating the enemy in order to make them susceptible to tactics that structure the battlefield to greatest advantage and exploit unexpected, devastating strikes. But even better, bending the enemy to one's will without any clash of arms always remains the best option. In addition to my 10 short YouTube talks, further information on Sun-tzu's vision, a comprehensive historical introduction, and a complete translation may be found in my Sun-tzu Art of War. Military developments and the era's conflicts may be found in my recently published Strife and Annihilation, the only English language study of spring and autumn warfare. As always, Thank you for watching.